続きまして、英国副主席医務官トーマス・ウェイト様をお招きしまして、国立研究開発法人日本医療研究開発機構 AMED10 周年シンポジウムと題しまして、ご講演を頂戴いたします。トーマス・ウェイト様はカーディフ大学医学部卒業後、公衆衛生、医療毒物学、医療教育の修士号を取得されました。そしてコロナウイルス対策では、イングランド副主席医務官として中心的な役割を果たされております。Professor Thomas Wade, the floor is over to you.
Good morning, and thank you ever so much to President Mishima, honoured guests, the governments of Japan, and many of you who are here today for the invitation to speak at this, the 10th anniversary of AMED. And congratulations to all of the AMED team. Your 10th anniversary, I think, has shown the importance of that by the attendance that is here today and the wide array of congratulatory and celebratory messages which are in the anniversary booklet. So thank you once again from me and from my colleagues in the United Kingdom for the collaborations to date. I thought it was useful to start, given that the theme is retrospectives and prospectives, by looking back at the Rogues Gallery, perhaps, from 10 years ago. And the United Kingdom was delighted to be represented at the International Symposium of AMED back 10 years ago in 2015 by our then Chief Medical Officer, Dame Sally Davis. Our Chief Medical Officer now, for whom I am the Deputy, is Professor Sir Chris Whitty, who is unable to travel. Those of you who know him may know that he has 3 jobs at the moment. He is our Chief Medical Officer. He is also working as our Permanent Secretary temporarily for the Department of Health and Social Care and continues his work as a hospital doctor. But he also, as well as sending his apologies, sends his congratulations and congratulations to AMED on the occasion of your 10th anniversary. That's basically all the retrospective. I want to look a little bit about our collaborations from here and the things we have done together. But as world-leading science and technology countries, we want to bring together our researchers, to bring together their excellence, to bring their work to bear on our shared health and care challenges. And so in this short address, I will cover both the health research that we have undertaken together. I will celebrate some of the collaborations that our countries and our agencies have undertaken together. I thought it might be helpful to look at some of our current shared challenges and then end with a prospective on what's next as we continue our collaborations together. So just as AMED's mission is to promote integrated research and development in the field of medicine, from basic research to clinical trials, so therefore across the translational pathway, we have organisations in the UK that do that. It's actually a little bit more of a complicated architecture, but it spans various government agencies as well as organisations outside of government. But principally for today, I thought it was useful to highlight the combined roles of the MRC, who many of you will know about, but also the National Institute of Health and Care Research. The MRC, as I say, is well known, so I thought it might be helpful to outline a little about the complementary role of the NIHR. Now, MRC, of course, has its roots in infectious disease and is really very long-standing. Back at the beginning of the 20th century, tuberculosis was one of the main healthcare challenges in the United Kingdom. In fact, so urgent it was that a royal commission was set up in 1901 to find out, indeed, whether TB in humans and in animals were even the same disease and whether the humans and animals could infect each other. That Royal Commission's work by 1919 had developed into the MRC, the first national fund for medical research. And one of the provisions of that work, paid for with 1 penny per working person in the United Kingdom, was sanatorium treatment, but also work for the purposes of research. And that created a national fund for medical research, which amounted to, in those days, £57,000 a year. That's about £4 million a year in today's money, or I think that's just under 800 million yen, a relatively modest sum of money by today's standards. But I think that demonstrates the early nature of the importance of medical research over the last 100 years. One of the things that came from the creation of the MRC was an important principle that scientific decisions were independent from government, and when that was first proposed in a 1918 report led by Lord Richard Haldane and that independence lives on today, known for us in the UK as the Haldane Principle, but essentially the absolute importance of having scientific advice for ministers, but made independently by scientists. And what this slide shows is the role of the MRC. You can see there in red across underpinning research, etiology and prevention, and where that sort of complementary bed-to-bedside approach hands over into the NIHR. Now you can see that right across the slide, through detection, through diagnosis, through treatment development and evaluation, through disease management and health services, there is significant overlap, but that reflects our sort of joint funding and activity in those areas. And specifically on clinical trials, one of the most important parts of work for AMED and for our organisations in the UK. MRC will typically fund up to phase 2A, with NIHR providing funding from phase 2B onwards. But in practice, the two organisations work very closely together with a joint programme which plays a key role in sort of translational research by testing novel or indeed repurposed interventions and technologies. That became very useful in COVID, as I will talk about a little bit later on, but it's particularly important across the piece for informing earlier stage research. The UK-Japan relationship on health research, I think, which is long-standing with MRC, has been actively strengthened by AMED going on to also partner with the NIHR. So working with both organisations has been crucial, I think, for medical research for both of our countries. So I've told you about the MRC, which I think some of you will have known about, but what is the NIHR? In essence, the NIHR is our applied health and care research agency and is the research operational arm of the Department of Health and Social Care. Its mission is to improve the health and wealth of the nation through research, and it was established much more recently than the MRC in 2006. It funds, it enables and delivers world-leading health and care research in the UK, but also internationally, and works in partnership with our National Health Service, with academics, with universities, with local government, with charity, and a range of other partners. And in doing so, invests over £1.6 billion per year in research, which goes towards not just research projects, but speaking to the points from some of our earlier speakers today, it goes towards career development awards, and it helps people, our facilities, and our technologies to be developed and to thrive. And it has a sort of 4-point mission, the NIHR, some of which you can see on this slide. We aim to deliver impact, so delivering research and development focused on the needs and priorities of the health and care system as we find it today. It aims to deliver inclusion, so embedding research and development right across the health and care system and improving access to new treatments. We aim to deliver innovation using R&D to invest in the foundational underpinning science alongside MRC, but also fourth, and I think crucially, it delivers investment using research and development to drive the life science sector in the UK to technical advantage. And that's really important because the economic return to society from investing in health research is high. A recent evaluation of the NIHR showed that for every £1 invested in NIHR research, society receives £13 back from direct health benefits, from profits for UK firms, and returns to the wider economy. And as I'll go on to talk about, with our shared challenge of an ageing society, that return on investment and the ability of health research to boost growth is going to be crucial. Excuse me. A little on the UK's relationship with Japan. Our relationship, I think, has grown further and faster than with any other international partner. That reflects Japan's pivotal role in the Indo-Pacific region, but also your centrality to the security and prosperity of the UK. You can see on the slide some wording from the Hiroshima Accord, which was signed by our previous prime ministers now between the UK and Japan on the 17th of May 2023, so just over 18 months ago. And that cemented our relationship with new agreements on defence, on trade and investment, on science and technology collaboration. But I think there's some really important text on the slide which was taken from the wording of the Accord itself, which was to forge stronger partnerships on translational, clinical and applied health and care research in key areas which I think are of interest to all of us in this room: genomic medicine, clinical trials, dementia, and working together on a range of key goals. So as I mentioned earlier on, being world-leading science and technology countries working together, bringing our researchers together to build on that excellence will help deal with the challenges of our generation. And I'll now outline two, I think, of the challenges that we are facing and have faced together. The first of those is our ageing societies. And as many of the speakers have mentioned today, this is something I think we can both recognise, the ageing of the populations in both our countries. And we have many things in common here, so much so that this was the focus of the 2023 report, so published just over sort of 15 months ago now, of the Chief Medical Officer in the UK. And the key recommendations from that report are listed on the slide. Some reflections, I think, are that one of the triumphs of modern medicine is that the great majority of people do now live into older age. And that, for many, is a source of great happiness. It gives you freedom to do what you want, the joys perhaps of being a grandparent, and a respected place for families in society. But at the other extreme, for some, older age is perhaps a time of great difficulty. People see their dignity impaired, their independence curtailed, and they see frailty, discomfort and loneliness. And the difference between those two states is largely driven by health, both physical and mental. So those who enter older age in good health maintain it. They often maintain it to the very end and have a very different experience to those who rapidly accumulate multiple conditions and can live with those for many years. Now, we all know that older people have an essential role in society, many essential roles in society, including significant caring responsibilities for younger generations, as well as their peers, but also that wealth of knowledge that comes with skills and knowledge accumulated over a lifetime. But those in older age have always depended more on family and wider society, so improving and maintaining the health of older people is a strong social responsibility, principally because it is good for them, but there are benefits to wider society if we can minimise the period of ill health and dependence in older age. And I think there are two main things that we can do there to help people live better in older age. Those divide into, number one, things which reduce disability and ill health, but two, things that we can do to adapt the environment we all live in to allow those who've got a set amount of disability in old age to live as independent and enjoyable a life as possible. And there are three key messages from this report that build on the recommendations. The first message is for policymakers, and I know there are some policymakers in the room, and we have really quite a concern actually in the UK that many professional bodies, as well as the policymakers, haven't recognised the degree to which people living in older age are concentrating increasingly in defined geographical areas. The maps on the left show that from 2 years ago, but projections into the future. And people essentially move out of the cities and large towns actually before they become older, but they concentrate geographically for us in coastal areas, in semi-rural areas, peripheral areas, and these are the same places that don't have good access to services and to transport links that people going into older age need. So Manchester, Birmingham, London, for example, the populations there are aging very slowly, but if you go to Norfolk, that's in the far east of the UK, the whole of the south coast, and places in the very north, again, coastal regions, often very beautiful, those populations are going to age predictably and they're going to age rapidly. So providing services and environments suitable for older people is going to be an absolute priority if we wish to make sure that all of our older citizens can have as much independence as possible. And the provision of health and social care is going to have to be concentrated in those areas. Moving on to the graph on the right, this is a message for the medical profession. So wider healthcare professionals, medical scientists, not just medics. It's to highlight the importance of multiple long-term conditions in older age. Medical jargon for that is multimorbidity, but there is increasing and will continue to increase to be that in the future. Medical training and medical specialisation, healthcare provision, clinical guidelines, medical research are all, I think, optimized at the moment for single conditions rather than for that wide range of conditions that combine. That's a lived reality for the great majority of older adults, that they have multiple conditions. And they can often go quite rapidly, in fact, from having no problems at all to several different debilitating health conditions. So all of those trends, the increasing very fine specialization and medical training, right the way through that we run our services, is something we, healthcare professionals, have got to address rapidly as a professional. And if you look at the graph on the right, what that is essentially showing is that over the coming 50 years, so by the end of this, not decade, the end of this century, we will see the rate of dependent, or sorry, the ratio of dependent people who are aged over 70 and unwell to those who are well and in working age going from 20 per 100, so about 1 in 5, to 50 people who are dependent per 100 working age people. That's a huge increase, and one that we as a medical profession have to plan for. But a third message, and one that really I think is for the general public, is one of optimism. So I wanted to highlight that whilst we're seeing quite an increase in the number of older people, most people enter older age and many remain in good health. And you can see on the slide here the population pyramids going back over the last 100 years and projected forward. It doesn't take a genius to see how quickly the UK population is changing in shape. A great many people will go through older age sufficient to have independence and a high quality of life. Most people do not have Alzheimer's, they do not have other dementias, they do not have major debilitating conditions. And the portrayal of older age as something which is negative is not fitting with the experience of most people. Older age is in general positive. And one of the most satisfying things that we as doctors experience is caring for a great range of men and women of a grand old age. Some of that's due to luck, but the chances of delaying disease and disability are substantially increased by some of the straightforward measures that we, as preventative doctors, all know people can take to delay disease, maintain physical, mental, and social activity. So that's a cause for optimism. The history of the last few decades has been one of people living longer and longer, but also living longer and longer with disease and disability, and that is not inevitable. So it should be a major aim of policy and medical practice, which we, as health and care researchers, have a major role to play. I'll move on now from ageing to another combined challenge, which has been COVID. I will be relatively brief here, as I know we're going to be talking about this in more detail this afternoon. But during the pandemic, in the United Kingdom, the successful and actually rapid research response wouldn't have been possible without the existing infrastructure of organisations such as the MRC and the NIHR. Research was already embedded in our clinical settings, but there was a huge amount of innovation that was needed to pivot rapidly to the challenges of the day. For example, there was a proliferation of innovative platform trials. I've listed some of those on this slide. Decentralized trial, but also things like remote patient monitoring, which stay with us to this day. Now, I think we all know that for the United Kingdom, COVID was the most serious pandemic in terms of mortality and impact on society since the H1N1 influenza pandemic of 1918. And whilst pandemics on that sort of scale and severity are rare, there are many more near misses and larger epidemics, places where we can really significantly apply the learning from the pandemic. Science has, since at least 1850 and probably for all time, always provided the exit strategy from major pandemics and epidemics. I'm confident it will in the future, but new science takes time, and we need events like today working together between AMED and NIHR to nurture those relationships between pandemics. I think there are three broad reflections from the UK which are worth highlighting, and then I'll come on to three of our major trials. The first is that there were multiple strands of work, pieces of scientific work from different disciplines that were needed and had to be integrated at rapid speed. That's going to happen again for every major pandemic and epidemic, so we need to be ready to do it. The second reflection, I think, from the UK experience is that science and medicine are international. Pandemics, as we all know, as we all saw, cross borders, but much of what we learnt in the UK was from scientists, public health experts and clinicians in other countries, including in Japan. The experience of every country was different, but we were all facing the same pathogen. We all had different scientific strengths, and it would have been unwise for any one country, the UK particularly, to rely purely on either the scientific capacity of others or indeed think that we could do it all ourselves. And people really were dependent on that mixed experience, because that brings me on to my third point. The engagement of policymakers and the public with how we provided scientific insight was profound, and that was critical to our response in the UK. People rightly want to understand why particular interventions were being recommended and the rationale for those. And through the trials that were set up in the UK and international collaborations such as REMAP-CAP, the second on the slide here, that gave us the underlying evidence there. And just as people in a one-to-one clinical encounter, for those of us who are clinicians will know, they want to understand the logic, risks and benefits of a course and treatment, the same applies to what was being asked at national level in a pandemic. So as you can see on the slide, there were a huge number of people, 2 million people in the UK who took part in at least one study. And I was going to just go through a little bit of detail on 3 of the largest: Recovery, REMAP-CAP and Panoramic. Recovery in particular, that's the randomized evaluation of COVID-19 therapy, for those who weren't involved in it, was designed to make new drugs or discover new drug therapies to treat people who were in hospital with severe COVID-19. And it got set up at incredible speed, enrolling patients from the 23rd of March 2020. And I think as of the middle of last year, they tested 15 treatments in 49,000 participants globally with a range of major outputs. The most well-known of those is dexamethasone, as I'll come on to in the next slide. But it was also critical for demonstrating that 10 proposed treatments, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, quite a range of things that people will remember from the news at the time, actually didn't work. And being able to demonstrate that lack of effect was as important as the sort of the discoveries of things which did make an impact on people's recovery, for being able to quickly put aside treatments that were no longer worth pursuing. Next on the list is Panoramic. This was the world's largest study of community-based treatments for acute COVID-19, so out in the community, which began in November 2021, and essentially looked at 2 antivirals, molnupiravir and Paxlovid, to see whether they were effective at helping people recover sooner and without going into hospital. That recruited 29,000 people across 72 sites. And its major finding actually was that molnupiravir didn't decrease hospitalizations or deaths among people who are high risk, and by that stage a heavily vaccinated population. We did find some points around it costing more to treat people with Panoramic than not, and there are some findings from the Paxlovid arm. This is still to be published. I'm getting tight for time, so I will briefly move on to REMAP-CAP, which you may be more familiar with, because of course REMAP-CAP was designed as an international effort funded by the European Commission, and it's great to see some colleagues from the Commission here today. And that started actually just before COVID in May 2019. But the idea was to study treatments for community-acquired pneumonia in critically hospitalized patients. It's still active today. It's not just something that was related to COVID. And as of last month, I'm hoping people will agree with me, I think there were somewhere in the region of 116 sites, 117 sites across Europe still recruiting. And the findings from REMAP-CAP for the UK resulted in us being able to create clinical guidelines for the critically ill. We were able to look at the reduction in the use of ineffective treatments, and that helped us put aside the risk of major side effects and inefficient resource. Hiroki Saito wrote recently in The Lancet that diseases cross borders, and so should trials. And that, I think, was really ably demonstrated by the pivoting of REMAP-CAP to COVID therapeutics. And Japan, and thank you to all of the Japanese colleagues here, were a pivotal part in that multilateral and collaborative effort. Recovery. And the recovery trial, as the headline states here, was absolutely critical and saved 1 million lives, with the finding alone that dexamethasone reduced mortality in seriously ill patients who were requiring ventilation. That could be done by July 2020, and we will all remember the dark days of the early stages of the pandemic, demonstrates the rapid impact of science can have on the lives of our patients. That's why we're all here, and the success of COVID-19 research response right the way across the world, I think, serves as a model for future platform trials, and something that we must remember as we are planning for future pandemics. So moving on, the prospective part of today's talk, and I want to look a little bit at the long-term UK-Japan relationship on science and technology. This is the sort of the forward look. Where are we going together? So the UK's collaboration with AMED is in the context of a rich history, as I've already said, of our collaboration on science and technology. 2024, was the 30th anniversary of the Japan-UK Science and Technology Cooperation Agreement, and we were delighted that UKRI, the NIHR and AMED all attended a reception at the Japanese Embassy in London to celebrate that. Alongside that, the MRC and AMED, as has been mentioned earlier on in one of the talks, signed a memorandum of cooperation in 2017, and that was renewed in 2023. AMED's collaboration with the NIHR builds on that, and it pushes further into the clinical, the translational, and the applied aspects of research in which both of our organisations are so strong. That's important because that helps us put treatments into practice and put for people who are in care, and that will improve our overall treatment of our citizens. So cooperation across some of the key areas that are listed on this slide are really at the heart of the way that we collaborate. I don't want to talk too much about the AMED-MRC collaboration, as I noticed this picture was already used earlier on with the timeline of the ways in which the MRC and AMED have collaborated. But I did just want to draw attention to some text in the anniversary booklet from Patrick Chinnery, because we were particularly pleased that AMED decided to have its European office base in London and was there at the launch of the London office in 2017. The Memorandum of Cooperation, which I mentioned earlier on, has just been renewed, found desire to strengthen our links in regenerative medicine, in dementia research relevant to our ageing populations, antimicrobial resistance and infectious disease research. But there is a fuller message of congratulations from Patrick in the anniversary booklet, and I'd encourage you all to read that. So ending with the present day, much more recently, in fact, only 3 months ago now, the Department of Health and Social Care, which is the UK's health ministry, and the Ministry of Health here in Japan, signed a memorandum of cooperation on innovation in health in December 2024. Both AMED and our NIHR as listed as implementing agencies for that. And that's important because it includes health and care research as well as clinical trials. So we were delighted that our Chief Scientific Advisor for Health, that's Lucy Chappell on the left in this picture, were able to join you alongside Chris Wormald, who was then our Permanent Secretary for Health. He's moved on to greater things now for those who follow UK politics. But that was helpful for them to be able to share insight into the challenges that both of our countries face. Even more recently, NIHR and AMED co-hosted a roundtable of UK and Japanese experts in paediatric cancer in February of this year, and that was important for helping to scope future partnership activities. And finally, the NIHR has again been named as a UK-based participating funding agency, that's with UKRI, Cancer Research UK and the Wellcome, as part of the Aspire alignment call, and many people have already mentioned the importance of Aspire here. That will enable NIHR-funded researchers to collaborate with AMED not only on applied and clinical health, but also care research, which will be so important as our populations age. We see great benefit in the health research partnership between the NIHR and AMED for people in Japan, the UK, and beyond. And I want to end by thanking again President Mishima, honoured guests and colleagues. Thank you for your organisation of today's event. By combining our resources, our expertise, our infrastructure, and our shared vision, this partnership between our two countries will foster cutting-edge research to address some of the most complex health challenges that we face. We look forward to continuing that partnership over the next decade and long into the future. Thank you very much.
Professor Thomas Wei, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your great presentation.